Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm happy to have you here with me today where we are going to make a whole bunch of soup. We're going to actually make 4 different types of soup today, and one of those we are going to can. I used up just about all of my canned chicken and turkey soup over the last couple of months. We had a couple illnesses in the house, and it is the most fabulously nourishing thing to eat when you're not feeling well. So I need to restock my pantry again and make some more. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna do a turkey soup that we're going to can. We are also going to do a creamy squash, potato, and carrot soup that I am going to kind of invent as we go along using some of the leftovers from our Christmas dinner. We have a whole bunch of leftovers and we are all leftovered out at this point, so I'm going to turn that into a soup as well. We're going to make a creamy tomato soup and we are going to make a minestrone soup. So the reason that I am making so many soups is because, I don't know about you, but I struggle a little bit with being creative at lunchtime. So what I've decided to do is on the weekends to prepare some of the lunches that we need for the week, just throw them in the freezer and pull them out when we need them so that I don't need to be thinking about it throughout the week. I personally find dinner time fairly easy to be creative with, or at least be able to just whip something together and have a decent dinner. But lunch, just, I don't know why. It's just one of those things I struggle with. So I think this is going to be very helpful. A couple of these recipes come out of the Little Mountain Ranch family cookbook, which is again out of stock. You guys sold me out again, which is just absolutely fantastic. I'm so grateful for that. And we have another order in, so we'll be restocking the store probably within about 2 weeks or so, but there are still a few Canadian books available over on our website, which I'll link down in the show notes below. So a couple of the recipes come from the cookbook. One of the recipes comes from, at least I'm using it as an inspiration, is the vegetable soup from the complete book of home preserving. This is the Ball book. Oh, well, the other one is coming from my imagination because that's the one that we're going to use the leftovers and put together as we go. So we're going to start with our canning recipe because the canning time for this is 85 minutes, which is quite lengthy. So I thought we would get this one going first, get it into the canner, the recipe into the canner, and then we'll move on to our other soups. So this is a pretty easy recipe, and this recipe is one that you can actually modify as long as you follow some basic principles. So basically the idea with pressure canning your own homemade soup recipes is to fill the jar about halfway with your solid ingredients. So that would be your meat, your potatoes, your carrots, your corn, whatever it is that you're going to be using in your soup. And then the rest of it you would fill with a liquid. That could be water, that could be broth. In this case, we're going to be using turkey broth that I've actually been simmering on the stove for the last 4 hours using the bones left over from our turkey dinner. And then you can add whatever seasonings you like to this. In order to make sure that the soup that you are canning is safe, whatever ingredients you use, the one that requires the longest processing time is the processing time you're going to use for the soup itself. Also, you don't want to use anything that's really high in fat, any dairy, or any of the ingredients that would be technically considered unsafe as far as canning. And you can find a list of those ingredients in the website that I'll link for you down below. So in this one today, we are going to add a little bit of parsley. So this is some of the parsley that we freeze dried this summer. I'm going to grab a funnel just to keep this kind of clean. So we're going to add a pinch of parsley, a good sized pinch, probably a little over a teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons. My washing machine is going downstairs in the basement and it was just about finished its load, so I decided not to pause it. So we're going to listen to the washing machine do its spin for the next couple of minutes. You know what I love about freeze-dried herbs? This is freeze-dried with my Harvest Right freeze dryer, is that they really do smell exactly like they did when I picked them out of the garden, which is just fantastic. So we're gonna do, I'm actually going to just crush these leaves up. You can see that they're almost full size. Oh, this is basil actually. This isn't sage, this is basil. So we're gonna take a little bit of our basil here and just crush it up with my hands. Pull a few of the stems out that I have in there still. And then we're just gonna add a pinch of basil, and I'm not gonna mess around with the funnel because it's a little bit too time consuming and these herbs aren't gonna make a big mess. So we're gonna add a little pinch of basil to this. And I do not add any salt or pepper, or at least I'm not now adding any salt or pepper to my soups, because I would much prefer just to season it depending on how much salt or pepper that I want in it when I'm actually eating it. And that way each individual person can season it according to their taste preferences. So I'm going to do the same thing with my sage as I did with the basil, and just put a bit of it in. Ooh, that's probably more sage than we need, into the bowl here, and just crush it up. And yes, this could absolutely be done right after it comes out of the freeze dryer, and just run it through a food processor. So I'm doing a bit of a smaller pinch, maybe half of a teaspoon of sage. But usually by the time I'm doing my last herb harvest in the garden, I'm kind of ready to be done. So just throw it in the jars and then just deal with it when I'm actually going to use it. Okie dokie. And that's all I'm going to do for the actual seasoning here. So I have a white onion and a red onion in here. And I will use the funnel for this because the onion is a little sticky. I'm going to add a nice scoop of onion to each of these jars. And I'm doing 10 jars here. I may end up canning a couple of jars of just the broth, depending on how much broth I have left over, but I did want to use the broth. Oh, there is my washing machine beeping at me. So this was 5 chopped onions for these 10 jars. I'm going to add a little bit of garlic to each of these, around half a teaspoon. This has been the first year that I have really canned a lot of prepared meals. And I'm so incredibly grateful that I did, because we used a ton of them while I was sick over the month of November and for a lot of December. So incredibly grateful. Definitely going to make sure that I do that in following years, because what a blessing that was to have, I cannot tell you. One of the things that I did find when I was using all the soups that I made is that the veggies that were cut up nice and small like this, so this is diced with my food processor, just made for a much nicer eating experience of the soup. And each scoop, you had a few different things in it. So we've cut these to be as small as I think that I can get away with, well, so that they can still retain their shape and texture a little bit. All right, and then we have some of the leftover turkey. We didn't have a ton, so I'm just going to be adding a small handful to each of these. So I wasn't planning on it, but I think I'm going to add some corn to these since I didn't have that much meat to add to it. So next up we'll add the carrots, and then we'll just top it off with a little bit of corn. So I'm gonna add a good handful of carrots to these. So we're just going to add, I'm gonna grab a scoop for that, just around a half a cup of corn to each of these. So you can see I'm a little over half of the solids to this, and the rule of thumb is to do around half. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your own recipes. Okay, then for our broth, I have all the bones still in there, so I'm going to bring that pot over to the sink and strain out the bones. So I'm just going to let this strain out for a minute, and while it's sitting here, I'm going to go through and pull out any of the turkey that I have that's still usable. There's still quite a lot of turkey that's going to come off of here. Whew, that's warm. And so I'm going to go through and pull out the extra turkey. Let's grab some tongs. That is just too hot. Okay, I'll probably spend a little bit more time and pick a bit more out of there. But in the meantime, let's take this beautiful broth back over to our jars, and we're going to top off our jars with this beautiful turkey broth here. So this broth, I'm gonna get something bigger, does have all the fat from the turkey in it. And if you want to remove that, you can put it in your fridge overnight and then skim. The fat's really easy to skim off. In the morning, I am not gonna worry about that. Oh my gosh, this smells so good. So this broth is just the bones, and I had onions and apples and garlic stuffed inside the turkey, so that is also in here, and a couple bay leaves, and that's it. I just kept it super simple, and it smells so good. So it's taking just under 3 cups. This is a 1.5 cup measure of broth to top off these jars. And because my broth is nice and hot, it's going to be the same temperature as my canner. I have my electric Presto pressure canner back there, and it is currently warming. So just one of the things, kind of just a standard rule of thumb for canning, is to make sure that all your stuff is the same temperature. And the reason for that is just because any drastic change in temperature is going to potentially crack your jars. I have had very good luck this year with not having jars crack, and I break a lot of the rules. Like, for instance, I have cold stuff in here, frozen corn, and I'm dumping this hot liquid in here. But the jars aren't breaking, so we're good. And I'm gonna be a little short on my broth, but that's no problem. We'll just top it off with some water, and this one might need a little extra seasoning. So we're going to debubble our jars, just give everything a stir, make sure that all the air is out that could potentially be trapped in my veg here. I just want to eat this right now. It smells so good. So I am going to run my electric canner and one of my stovetop canners, but I'm going to wait to run the stovetop one until I'm done making all the other soups. Number one, the stovetop canners are noisy, so you won't be able to hear me talk if I run that one, but also because I need the space on the stove for cooking up the other soups. So now we're just going to wash off the rims of our jars just to remove any sticky residue or fat that might be on there, and then we're going to lid them up. So I've talked about this before, especially when I was in the thick of canning in the fall, but how much I love the electric pressure canner. So much. The biggest reason I love it actually is because of the lack of sound from it. I just find that with pressure canners going all day long in a noisy house, it's too much noise. So I just love the kind of put it in. Once it's started its actual canning cycle, you can just kind of leave it. It doesn't require supervision, which is wonderful because it means you can get on to other things and you're not married to the kitchen for the entire day. Okay, I'm gonna lid these up. The electric pressure canner fits 5. So, whoopsie daisy. Let's give that a rinse off. So I'll get 5 going, and these jars are pretty hot because that was boiling. So I think I'll just leave these on the counter until we're finished all the other stuff, and then I'll get my other canner going and pop these other ones in. There, doesn't that look nice? I didn't add the potatoes, which you probably noticed because the potatoes were sitting here. And that actually worked out okay because I couldn't have fit them in there with the ratios of the other things that I had anyway. And I think this is going to be the perfect soup for when people aren't feeling well. I find potato, of all of the things that were in my homemade soups, the potato was the one ingredient that got left in the bowl when I wasn't feeling well. So I'll use these in one of our other soups today. Okay, our canner is already set for 90 minutes, which is the amount of time we need for a soup that has meat in it. So now we just let this be while we go make the rest of our soups. The Veggie Minestrone is on page 43 of my cookbook. We do have international shipping now available for our cookbooks, which is just fantastic. However, if that price is a little bit too high for you with that extra shipping costs, we do have a digital version of our cookbook as well. And a lot of people have written me and told me that they've had them printed at a local printer or even printed on their home printer, and they've turned out great. They are color heavy because there are pictures for every recipe in the cookbook. So that is something to keep in mind. If you are going to use your home printers, you're probably going to use up all your printer ink, but it's not that expensive to get them printed at a local printer. So just something to think about. So like I said, it's on page 43. So one of the things that's really nice about the way that I have put this recipe together is it really is dump everything into a pot and let it slow cook for a while until all the veggies are soft and it's good to go, and it is absolutely delicious. The way that I can get away with doing that is because I use some of my canned French onion soup. If you don't have canned French onion soup, you can use some onions, some chopped up onions and chopped up garlic, and a little bit of beef broth or veggie broth or anything. You can even use water as long as your herbs and your spices and everything are really flavorful. You can do that in place of the canned French onion soup. But if you have canned French onion soup, this could not be easier or quicker to put together. Let me show you. So into a good size pot here, we are going to dump in our French onion soup. Oh, that smells so good. A quart of diced tomatoes. And you could absolutely throw this recipe together with store-bought ingredients if that's what you have access to. So then we're gonna add 2 quarts of broth. And I'm going to take a quart of kidney beans and go rinse these off in the strainer. In our beans go. So 6 chopped carrots, and these are diced because like I said, I'm really liking the smaller pieces of veggies in my soup. I have some squash here that's just been sitting in some water so it didn't dry out. This is one smallish squash. See what I mean about easy? I have some grated zucchini here we're gonna throw in as well. And this is just zucchini that I froze. I need some scissors, one sec. That I grated and froze in the summertime when zucchinis were prolific. So I'm just over here, underneath you here, I'm just squeezing out the extra liquid. Not really necessary when you're gonna use it with a soup, but definitely helpful if you're gonna use it in other kind of baked goods. So I'm gonna throw that in there. So we're going to be adding some basil and some parsley, as much as you like for your own taste preferences. And friends, just let me give this a stir and show you just how beautiful this soup looks. Look at that. Isn't that just beautiful? So the way that I have done this is just thrown everything in the pot, and then I'm going to simmer this until all the veggies are nice and soft. In my directions in the cookbook, you can totally do it this way if you are short on time. I do have it in some extra steps that do help to richen the flavor a little bit, but really the difference is pretty small. So do it however you like. So now we're gonna go get this on the stove. I love minestrone soup so much, and this one is my favorite one that I have ever come up with. It's so delicious, and you could add meat into it if you like, but even just as a vegetarian soup, it is so good. I have my potatoes here sitting in the pot that I need. Ooh, that was loud. That I need for my tomato soup. So we're gonna switch things around. Now this is a soup that everyone in my house absolutely loves. And it is one that you can make with fresh tomatoes, which is definitely superior to using canned, but it's still absolutely delicious. So my plan with all these soups, if I didn't mention it earlier, is to freeze them. So the tomato soup that I'm doing right now is one that we're gonna have for lunch today, and it has a lot of dairy in it and some cream, so it doesn't freeze awesomely. You can still freeze it, but I would recommend running it through a blender when you heat it up, just so that it just, I don't know how to explain it, but just the texture isn't super great when you freeze dairy, and then it will be just fine. But we're going to use this one for today's lunch. So I have a half a cup of butter in there, and into that, the nice thing about this soup is you don't have to chop everything really fine, because you are going to run it through a blender or use an immersion blender. So we have some chunked up onion there and a bunch of garlic. So we're gonna go cook these down on the stove until everything is nice and caramelized. So I suspect putting all of these soups together, especially if I wasn't filming, would maybe take me an hour and a half or so with all the chopping and everything that's involved in it. And then I'm done 3 different lunches for the entire week, which takes a little bit of pressure off my brain when it comes to planning what I'm gonna be doing in the week. So I'm very excited about that. While the garlic and the onions over there is starting to caramelize, I am going to throw together this kind of leftover cream soup that I want to make. So I think it's going to be good, because I make a soup that's very similar to this. In fact, I do believe, just let me double check, that I have a soup that's very similar to this in my cookbook. Yes, I do. It's the squash soup that is on page 44. So this is kind of what I'm using as inspiration for this soup that I'm going to make here. So the first thing that I need to do is I'm going to throw in the leftover garlic I had from the canning recipe that I didn't end up needing, but I want more garlic than that. So I'm going to chop some up here. This is some of that beautiful garlic that we grew in the garden. I'm so excited about gardening, you guys. I'm already planning. I have one of my big seed orders already in, and I have a couple more that are going to be coming in the mail now that Canada Post is up and running again. Our postal system has had a strike happening for, I think, since like the 6th of November or something, which was terrible timing. But everything started moving again, so I'm going to be able to get my seed orders in. I'm very excited about that, about planning my garden for this year. So you know how every year I kind of have a flower theme in my garden? So I've had zinnias as kind of the prominent flower this year. Hang on, I'm just gonna give this a stir quickly and turn my heat down a little bit. This last year was definitely sunflowers. And then I've also actually a couple years ago with snapdragon. So I plant all these flowers in my garden every year, but they kind of take a prominent position in my garden, and I plant more of one kind of flower each year. So this is never really an intentional thing that I do. It is just more of a, I don't know, it's just whatever strikes my fancy. And last year, or this last summer, I grew poppies in my garden. I actually have grown poppies a couple of years in a row, but not a ton of them. But I love them so much. They're so dainty. And there's something about the short bloom lifespan of a poppy that makes them, I don't know how to explain it, but when I walk into the garden and there's poppies blooming, I stand there and just really take in their beauty, just because I know that when I walk through the garden in that evening, for instance, they're not going to look as glorious. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Either way, I have ordered a ridiculous amount of poppy seeds this year, all different kinds of them. And I was telling during our last community call for the LMR membership, I was telling them that what I'm going to do is take all the seed packs and just dump them into a bowl and mix them all together and do an entire row of poppies. So very excited about that. So this garlic is just kind of roughly chopped. So I'm going to throw that into the bottom of our pot here with the other garlic that I had. And then I'm going to take an onion, and I actually think I'm going to do 2 onions. And I'm going to chop this up and throw this in the pot. And similarly to the tomato soup, I'm going to be blending this soup up so I don't have to worry about chopping everything really fine, which I really like when it comes to soup making, because it's one of the things about soup making that can be time consuming, is all the chopping that's usually involved. Now we are going to throw what may seem like a ridiculous amount of butter in this pot, just about a cup of butter, because butter makes everything better. Number one, butter is kind of like bacon in our house. It's just one of those things that we love. But in this soup, having a fair bit of butter in it just makes the flavor that much better. Okay, we're gonna go fry this up. We're gonna throw in all these leftovers. So I have a bunch of leftover carrots and a tray of leftover squash. And this is just cooked with butter, so that's all that's in there. And then we have some more leftover squash over on this side and some mashed potatoes over here. So we're actually gonna throw all of these into the pot once that is cooked. And then we're gonna add our seasonings and make a delicious cream soup. And this is also gonna be super easy because everything is already cooked. So it should come together really fast. So we have our onion and our garlic over here. So now we're gonna add 2 quarts of tomatoes, and these are diced. We are going to add parsley, basil, pepper, and into our big pot over here with our onion, garlic, and butter, we are going to add all of our squash and our mashed potatoes and our other squash over here. And to top this off, we are going to cover this with some broth. And I'm probably just going to use chicken broth, but you could use veggie. I just wouldn't recommend beef. That would be the only one I don't think would taste great. I'm not going to add all the carrots, just, I don't know, about 2 cups worth. Okay, so into this, I'm going to add a bunch of broth, so enough broth to cover all the veggies that we put in here. Four was perfect. So now we'll give this a stir. And then into this, for seasoning, I'm going to add some turmeric, I don't know, good sized teaspoon, some mild curry powder. I'm going to add just about a tablespoon of that. And I was going to add some ground nutmeg, but my nutmeg's empty, so I'm going to have to go fill that up. Just a little bit of nutmeg, and then I'm going to also add a little bit of cumin. Oh my goodness, this smells so good. So it doesn't look fantastic yet, but it's going to look really good when we're done. So over here, we have what will be our minestrone soup, and then our tomato soup over here. So now all we have to do is get all of these soups cooked so our veggies are nice and soft. And then for both this potato, squash, carrot soup, I'm going to be blending this one and also the tomato soup as well. But we want these to cook for a little bit. All right, friends, now comes for the fun part with our soup. So I have this absolutely divine smelling tomato soup here. So what we're gonna do is add in around a 1/4 teaspoon or so of baking soda. And what this does, besides kind of being fun, is it makes it so that you can see how it's fizzling in there, so that our milk does not curdle when we add it. And now I have some cream here. Oh, honestly, even just like this would be absolutely delicious, but we're gonna elevate it even more by blending it in our blender. Now, if you want more texture in your soup, you could use an immersion blender, but we like our tomato soup super smooth. So something else you could add to this if you wanted is some roasted peppers, or roasted red peppers. That really elevates this flavor as well. But honestly, even just like this, it is absolute heaven. Okay, so one of the tricks that I do so that I don't have to dirty a second pot is I just pour the already mixed into one side, and then the stuff that is not mixed just kind of moves its way over to another side, or to the other side, and then I scoop that in and give it a whiz, and then all of our soup is nice and smooth. And there we go, creamy tomato deliciousness. Oh my goodness. Oh, that is so good, friends. So good. I'm gonna put this back over on the stove here. And now we're going to do the very same thing with our big pot of squash, carrot, potato cream soup. So we're gonna do exactly the same thing here, except that I have a couple of pieces of really well cooked squash. So I'm actually just going to pull those out as I see them. Oh my goodness, friends, if you could smell this soup, it smells incredible, like absolutely incredible. So because I have such a gigantic pot of soup here, I am gonna get a second bowl to pour my mixed soup in, because that's just not gonna work like that. Look at that. Goodness. Just gorgeous. I think this might be the best squash soup I've ever made. It's so good. Oh my goodness. So like just luscious and full of flavor. I don't know about you, but I prefer a soup that has a lot of flavor. And this is definitely that. It is so good. I think because all the veggies were roasted. This with some homemade bread. Okay, one more. And then I'm going to show you what we're going to add to it just to thin it out a little bit. Okay, so we're going to add 2 containers here of, or tins of coconut milk to this, just to thin it out a little bit. And the coconut milk just adds really nice flavor. A little bit of sweetness to it. Oh my gosh. Friends, please do yourself a favor and make a squash soup. Like I said, I have a recipe for squash soup and it's very similar to this. The biggest difference is that these veggies were roasted. And I do think that because it caramelizes them a little bit, gives a richer flavor to it. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. This has a little bit more mashed potatoes in it than I would normally put. Sometimes I put cubed potatoes in. And if you have leftovers from Thanksgiving and you want to make a delicious soup with those, this is really good. So last up, we have our minestrone soup here. So let's try a taste of that. I just want to show you a scoop of it so you can see all the gorgeous ingredients in there. Isn't that beautiful? If you want a little bit of the broth though. You could also throw a whole bunch of chopped kale in this. That would be really good too. Hot. Also, absolutely so good. So out of all of that soup I made, the 2 big pots of soup will last us for 2 meals. So that's 4 with the 2 big pots, and then the tomato soup we'll eat for lunch today, so that'll be 1. And then we have the 10 quarts of turkey soup that we'll be able to save for when either I don't want to cook or someone's feeling under the weather, and that is really exciting. Okay, I'm going to get my other canner on the stove now so that I can run the last batch of the soup through, but I'll be back with you when it's all done so that I can show you what it looks like when it's finished. All right, friends, you can see our canning is all done over there. I'll show you close up. So these ones just came out of the canner, so you can see that they're still bubbling away. These were the ones that were in the electric pressure canner, so they've finished bubbling, but you can see how different they look. But look how nice and rich that stock looks. This is going to be delicious. So my plan with the rest of the soup, we did eat the tomato soup for lunch, which my kids thought was absolutely delicious, which is great. I said that they could choose whichever one they wanted, and they all went for the tomato soup, actually, except for one of them who had the squash soup, and she said that was really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just letting this cool down all the way, and then I'm going to put it into containers and into the freezer for later on in the week. Like I said, these recipes are in my cookbook, but if you don't have my cookbook, I'm also going to share them on my blog and in my newsletter over the next couple of weeks. So my website is just www.littlemountainranch.com. And you can also get onto my newsletter from over there, but I have a link for signing up for it down below if you're not already a part of it. All right, friends, that's going to be it for me today. Good thing too, because my dryer is now going downstairs, my dishwasher's going up here. It's starting to get noisy around here. I hope that you all have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.